The Unseen Light. The music pulsed through the glass walls of the rooftop venue, a glittering cage of laughter and clinking champagne flutes. I stood near the edge of the crowd, my fingers wrapped around a tray of hors d'oeuvres, my name reduced to a single word: server. 3 years ago, I was Elias, the man who painted her world in colors she swore she'd never seen before. Now, to Nora, I was just the one who made sure the shrimp skewers didn't run out. She stood at the center of it all, her emerald dress catching the light like a forest fire. Her laughter was a melody I once thought was mine alone, but tonight it rang for someone else, Julian, the man she once called too polished, too hollow. He was at her side, his hand resting on her waist as if it belonged there, his smile sharp enough to cut through the noise. The crowd adored them. Cameras flashed. I adjusted my grip on the tray, my knuckles whitening, and kept my eyes on the floor. I wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not as the shadow in her spotlight. 3 years ago, we met under a sky bruised with storm clouds. I was sketching in a park, my pencil scratching out the shape of a willow tree when Nora sat on the bench beside me, her umbrella forgotten in the rain. "You see things differently," she said, peering at my sketchbook. Her voice was warm, like sunlight breaking through. We talked until the rain stopped, about art, about dreams, about the way the world felt too heavy sometimes. She said she was a painter too, but her canvases were events, galas, weddings, moments she shaped into memories for others. I told her I saw stories in shadows, in the way light fell across a stranger's face. She smiled and said, "You're not like anyone else, Elias." For a while it was true. We were a quiet kind of magic. I'd sketch her while she planned her events, her fingers stained with paint or ink as she scribbled ideas. I built her a website for her business. Stayed up nights editing her proposals, drove across the city at 3 a.m. to pick her up when a client meeting ran late. When her first big event flopped, a bride who hated the flowers, I sat with her on the floor of her tiny apartment, her head on my shoulder, and promised her she'd rise again. I loved her not because I needed her, but because I wanted to, be the one who made her feel weightless. But somewhere along the way, the colors faded. Nora's texts grew shorter, her smiles less frequent. She stopped asking to see my sketches. She'd cancel our plans for urgent client calls, and I'd find her laughing in photos online, Julian's arm slung casually around her. "He's just a partner," she'd say, rolling her eyes. "He's all flash, no depth." But I saw the way her gaze lingered on him, the way her voice softened when she said his name. I told myself it was nothing, that I was reading too much into the silences. I was wrong. Tonight was her biggest event yet, a charity gala she'd spent months planning. I wasn't supposed to be working it, but when her usual server canceled, she called me. "Elias, you're a lifesaver," she said, her voice bright, but distant. I didn't say no. I never did. I showed up in a borrowed black vest, tray in hand, my heart tucked away with the sketchbook I hadn't opened in weeks. I had planned something else for tonight. A small velvet box in my jacket pocket, a ring I'd spent months designing. It wasn't grand, but it was hers, with a sapphire the color of the sky we met under. I'd imagined proposing on the rooftop, after the gala, under the stars, with her favorite song playing softly. I'd even bribed the DJ to cue it up, but then she stepped onto the stage, her arm looped through Julian's, and introduced him as the one who made this night possible. The crowd roared. My chest tightened. Someone bumped into me, muttering, "Hey, server, more champagne?" I nodded, my jaw locked, and moved through the crowd like a ghost. Nora's eyes flicked my way once, just once, and I thought I saw a flicker of something. Regret, maybe. But then she turned back to Julian, her smile brighter than ever, and I knew I was nothing but a shadow to her now. "Who's that guy with the tray?" someone called out, their voice slurred with wine. Nora's gaze landed on me again, and for a moment I held my breath. "Oh, him?" she said, her voice light as air. "He's just helping out." The words hit like a blade, clean and sharp. I didn't flinch. I smiled, nodded at the guest, and kept moving, the tray steady in my hands. The ring in my pocket felt heavier than ever, a stone sinking into the sea. I slipped out to the rooftop's edge, where the city lights blurred into a constellation of someone else's dreams. The wind was sharp, cutting through my thin vest. I set the tray down and pulled out the ring box, turning it over in my hands. The sapphire gleamed, catching the faint glow of the Gala behind me. I'd spent hours picking it, imagining her face when she saw it. Now, it felt like a relic of a life I'd never live. "Elias?" A voice broke the silence, soft but steady. It was Mara, one of Nora's assistants, who'd always been kind to me in a way that didn't demand attention. She was unassuming, with dark eyes that saw more than they let on. She stepped closer, her hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. "You okay?" I didn't answer right away. I just held up the ring box. "I was going to give her this tonight," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Mara's eyes widened, but she didn't speak. She just waited, like she always did, letting me fill the silence. 3 years, I said. 3 years of carrying her dreams, her tears, her everything. And she calls me the help. Mara's gaze softened. "You're not the help, Elias. You're the one who held her world together." She paused, then added, "But she stopped holding yours a long time ago." I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. Mara had been there through every late-night planning session, every crisis Nora threw at her team. She'd never complained, never faltered, and she'd never once made me feel like I was invisible. "Why do we do it?" I asked, my voice raw. "Why do we keep loving people who don't see us?" "Because we see the best in them," she said simply, "even when they don't deserve it." I laughed, a bitter sound. "I was going to ask her to marry me tonight. I had it all planned. The stars, the song, the words. And now—" I trailed off, staring at the ring. "Now I don't even know who I am without her." Mara stepped closer, her shoulder brushing mine. "You're Elias, the guy who sees stories in shadows, the guy who makes the world feel softer, even when it's breaking. You don't need her to be that." I turned the ring box over one last time, then snapped it shut. "What if I gave this to you instead?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, half joking, half desperate. Mara froze, her breath catching. "I know it's crazy," I said quickly. "I'm not saying right now, or even soon. You've always seen me, Mara, even when I didn't see myself." Her lips parted, but before she could respond, the rooftop door swung open. Nora stood there, her dress shimmering under the lanterns, her eyes narrowing as they landed on us. "Elias, what's this?" Her voice was sharp, suspicious, like she'd caught us stealing something that belonged to her. "Just talking," I said, my tone flat. I slipped the ring box back into my pocket. Nora's gaze dropped to my hand, and her expression shifted, surprise, then something like panic. "Is that—" she started, but didn't finish. She didn't need to. I said, meeting her eyes. "Until I realized you'd already chosen someone else." Her face crumpled, but only for a moment. "You're doing this to hurt me," she said, her voice low. "No," I said, calm but firm. "I'm doing this to stop hurting myself." Mara stood silent, but her presence was a quiet strength beside me. Nora's eyes flicked to her, then back to me. "You think she knows you better than I do?" she asked, her voice trembling with something between anger and fear. "I think she sees me," I said. "And that's enough." Nora opened her mouth, then closed it. She turned and walked back inside, her heels clicking against the stone. The door shut behind her and the silence returned, heavier this time. Mara looked at me. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I did," I said. "For me." The gala ended, but I didn't stay to clean up. I drove home, the city lights streaking past like memories I didn't want to chase. The ring box sat on my passenger seat, a quiet passenger of its own. When I got to my apartment, I placed it on my desk and opened my sketchbook for the first time in weeks. I drew the rooftop, the lanterns, the way Mara's eyes had held mine without judgment. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Days turned into weeks. Nora didn't call, didn't text. I heard through a mutual friend that she and Julian had parted ways, not with a fight, but with the kind of quiet unraveling that happens when two people realize they were never really together. I didn't feel vindicated, I just felt free. Mara and I started meeting for coffee, then for walks, then for nothing at all, just to be in each other's quiet. She didn't push me to talk about Nora, and I didn't need to. She showed me her own sketches, simple but raw, and I showed her mine. We built something new, not out of grand gestures, but out of small truths. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, I pulled the ring box from my pocket. "I'm not giving this to you," I said, before she could misunderstand. "Not yet, but I want you to know it's not for anyone else either." Mara smiled, her hand brushing mine. "I don't need a ring to see you, Elias," and that was enough. That was enough. Months later, I got an email from Nora. She was moving to a small coastal town, starting over. "I hope you're happy," she wrote. "I'm trying to be." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The man who loved her was gone, not because she broke him, but because he'd learned to love himself first. I closed my laptop and picked up my sketchbook. Mara was waiting outside, her laugh already pulling me toward the light, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to step into it. The months that followed were a quiet kind of healing, like watching a bruise fade day by day. Mara and I didn't rush, didn't force labels or promises. We let things grow naturally, like wildflowers pushing through cracks in concrete. I started sketching again, not just for work, but for myself, capturing the way light danced on the river at dawn, the curve of Mara's wrist as she wrote in her notebook, the fleeting shadows of strangers passing by. Each stroke of my pencil felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd given away too freely. One afternoon, I found myself back, at the park where I'd met Nora. The willow tree still stood, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. I sat on the same bench, sketchbook open, but this time I wasn't alone. Mara sat beside me, her own sketchbook balanced on her knees. She was drawing the same tree, but her version was bolder, with sharp lines and unexpected bursts of color. "You see it differently," I said, echoing Nora's words from years ago, but this time they felt new, untainted. "I see what's there," Mara replied, her eyes meeting mine. "And what's possible?" I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it reached every part of me. I flipped to a blank page and started sketching her. Not just her face, but the way she sat, the way her presence felt like a safe harbor in a storm. When I showed it to her, she didn't say anything, just leaned her head on my shoulder. That was enough. A year later, I got an invitation in the mail, gold embossed and heavy with expectation. It was for Julian's wedding to a woman, named Celeste, someone I'd never met but whose name I'd seen in Nora's old client files. The venue was the same rooftop where I'd stood invisible, tray in hand. I held the invitation for a long moment, then set it down. Mara noticed it on the table that evening. "You going?" she asked, her tone neutral. "I don't think so," I said. "But I want to see it. Not for them. For me." She nodded, understanding without needing an explanation. "Want company?" I shook my head. Some things I need to finish alone. The night of the wedding, I dressed simply. Black jacket, no tie, my sketchbook tucked under my arm. The rooftop was as beautiful as I remembered, draped in white flowers and fairy lights, the city skyline glittering like a promise. I stayed near the back, unnoticed, my eyes scanning the crowd. Julian stood at the front, his smile as polished as ever, but there was a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. Celeste was radiant, but her eyes darted nervously, like she was playing a role she wasn't sure she wanted. And then I saw Nora. She was near the bar, arranging a tray of glasses with the same meticulous care she'd always given her work. Her dress was elegant but understated, her face a mask of professionalism. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, her hands froze mid-motion. She walked over, her steps hesitant. "Elias," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't expect you." "Got the invitation," I said, keeping my tone even. "Thought I'd see what I missed." Her eyes searched mine, looking for something. Anger, maybe, or regret. She wouldn't find either. "I'm just working tonight," she said, gesturing to the bar. "Helping out." I nodded, the irony not lost on me. "Funny how that works." She looked down, twisting her hands together. "I heard you're doing well. Your sketches are everywhere now. People talk about them." "I'm doing what I love," I said. "That's enough." She swallowed, her gaze flickering to the crowd, then back to me. "I messed up, Elias. With you, with Julian, with everything. I thought I wanted the spotlight, but it's empty." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was written in the way she stood, a little smaller than I remembered, like the weight of her choices had finally settled. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking, "for not seeing you, for not choosing you." "I'm not," I said gently. "It taught me how to choose myself." She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "You're happy, aren't you?" I thought of Mara, of the quiet mornings we spent sketching together, of the way her laughter felt like home. "Yeah," I said. "I am." Nora gave me a small, sad smile. "I'm glad." I turned to leave, but paused. I reached into my sketchbook and pulled out a small drawing I'd done months ago. A sketch of the willow tree from the day we met, its branches heavy with rain. I handed it to her. "Keep it," I said. "Not as a memory, but as a reminder. You're worth more than the shadows you've been chasing." She took it, her fingers trembling. "Thank you, Elias." I walked away, the music fading behind me, the city air cool against my skin. When I got home, Mara was on the balcony, her sketchbook open, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked up as I stepped outside. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I sat beside her, letting the quiet settle around us. "Yeah," I said. "I'm more than okay." She leaned into me, her warmth grounding me in a way I'd never thought possible. "Good," she said, "because you deserve that." We sat there, watching the stars emerge one by one, my sketchbook still unopened in my lap. I didn't need to draw tonight. The story I'd been searching for was already here, in the quiet, in the light, in the life I was finally ready to live.